Commander Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the UHS Wanderer, watching the stars drift by in the endless black of space. The ship had been traveling for 3 months now, mapping new systems in the outer rim of the Andromeda sector. It was quiet work, peaceful even, but something felt wrong about this part of the galaxy. "Commander," called Lisa Campbell from her science station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Morrison turn around. "I'm getting some strange readings from the next system. You should see this." Morrison walked over to her station and looked at the display. The system ahead had 7 planets, 3 of them in the zone where life could exist. But the readings showed something else entirely. "These energy signatures," Lisa said, pointing at the screen. "They look artificial. Big cities, maybe entire civilizations. But there's no communication coming from any of them. Dead?" Morrison asked. "That's the strange part. The power sources are still active. The cities are still there. But nobody's home." Ryan Torres looked up from his navigation console. "Sir, I'm picking up similar readings from 12 other systems in the sector. All the same pattern. Big civilizations, active power, but total radio silence." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years exploring space, he had never seen anything like this. "Set course for the nearest system. We need to take a closer look." 2 days later, the Wanderer entered orbit around a blue-green planet that looked almost like Earth. The cities below were massive, stretching across entire continents. Towers reached up toward the sky like silver fingers, and transportation networks connected everything in perfect geometric patterns. "It's beautiful," whispered Amy Foster from the technical station. "Look at those buildings. The architecture is incredible." Danny Walsh was working at the communications panel, trying every frequency he could think of. "Still nothing, Commander. No response to any of our signals. It's like the whole planet is empty." Morrison made his decision. "Lisa, Elena, you're with me. We're going down there." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been quiet during the approach, studying the readings from her xenorchaeology equipment. She was the ship's expert on alien cultures, and Morrison trusted her judgment completely. An hour later, their shuttle touched down in what looked like the main plaza of one of the largest cities. The landing area was clearly designed for spacecraft, with guidance lights that still worked and landing pads that looked recently maintained. The 3 humans stepped out of the shuttle and immediately felt how empty everything was. The city was perfect, clean, and completely silent. Not even the sound of wind moving through the buildings. "The atmosphere is safe," Elena said, checking her instruments. "Temperature is comfortable. This place was definitely built for living beings like us." They walked through streets that should have been filled with traffic and people. Instead, they found only emptiness. The buildings were intact, the lights were on, but there was no sign of whoever had built this place. "Over here," Lisa called from ahead. She was standing next to a structure that looked different from the others. It was made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from within. Elena approached it with her scanner. "It's some kind of monument or marker. The crystal is artificial, but it's generating its own energy somehow." As she got closer, the crystal began to pulse with a soft light. Then, to their amazement, it began to make sounds. Not exactly speech, but something that sounded like communication. Danny's voice crackled through their radios from the ship above. "Commander, I'm picking up that signal from orbit. The computer is trying to translate it now." They waited while the ship's systems worked on the alien language. Finally, Danny's voice came back, but he sounded shaken. "Sir, the translation is rough, but the meaning is clear. It says we surrender. We go quietly into darkness. We do not resist anymore." Morrison felt his blood run cold. Surrender to what? They spent the next several hours exploring the city and examining more of the crystal monuments. Each one carried the same message in slightly different words. The beings who had lived here had given up, but the monuments didn't say why. "There's no sign of war," Elena observed as they walked through a residential area. "No damage, no weapons, no bodies. They just left." "Where did they go?" Lisa asked. Elena pointed her scanner at one of the buildings and checked the readings. According to the energy patterns, they walked out of their homes and never came back. Some of them seemed to have just stopped functioning where they stood. They returned to the ship as the planet's sun was setting, painting the empty city in shades of gold and orange. Morrison called a meeting in the conference room with his senior staff. "What we found down there doesn't make sense," he began. "An entire civilization that just gave up and walked away. No war, no disaster, no apparent reason." Ryan had been analyzing the navigation data. "Commander, I've been looking at the other systems in this sector. If the pattern holds, we're looking at dozens of dead civilizations, all within the same time period." Danny had been working on the communication signals. "Sir, I've been monitoring other frequencies. I'm picking up similar surrender messages from 17 different systems. All different languages, all saying the same thing." Amy looked up from her technical analysis. "The power systems on that planet are still running at optimal efficiency. Whoever built them designed them to last. It's like they wanted to leave everything perfect for someone else to find." Elena had been quiet during the discussion, studying the data from the crystal monuments. Finally, she spoke up. "I think we're looking at something bigger than just one planet or even one system. The surrender messages all happened within a 50-year period. That suggests something moved through this entire sector, causing every civilization to just give up." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Give up on what?" "On existing," Elena said quietly. "On living. On fighting for their survival. Something made them lose all hope." Lisa pulled up the stellar maps on the main screen. "If Elena is right, then whatever caused this might still be out there. And if it moved through this sector, She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood. If something had the power to make entire civilizations surrender without a fight, and if it was still moving through the galaxy, then humanity needed to know about it. Morrison stood up. "Set course for Earth. We need to report this to Command immediately." As the Wanderer turned away from the dead system and jumped into hyperspace, none of them could shake the feeling that they had just discovered something that would change everything. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a force so terrible that it could make entire species lose the will to live. And humanity was next in its path. 3 months had passed since the Wanderer discovered the empty cities. Commander Morrison and his crew had been searching through the dead systems, looking for answers. They found plenty of abandoned worlds, but no living beings to explain what had happened. That changed when Ryan Torres picked up something different on his sensors. "Commander, I'm getting life signs from the 4th planet in this system," he announced from his navigation station. "Not just a few scattered readings. This looks like an active civilization." Morrison felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who might have answers. "Are they responding to our communications?" Danny Walsh shook his head from the communications console. "Nothing on standard frequencies. But I am picking up some kind of organized signal pattern. It's very faint, like they're trying not to be noticed." "Take us in slowly," Morrison ordered. "Let's not scare them." The planet Zephy's Prime looked different from the abandoned worlds they had been exploring. Where the dead planets had cities that reached toward the sky, this world seemed to be hiding. The few structures they could see from orbit were built low and covered with what looked like camouflage. "Sir," Lisa Campbell called from her science station, "I'm detecting massive underground complexes. Most of the population seems to be living below the surface." Elena Rodriguez was studying the cultural readings. This doesn't look like a species that naturally lives underground. The surface structures suggest they used to have a normal surface civilization. Something made them hide. Morrison made his decision. We're going down. But we go in small and peaceful. Lisa, Elena, Peter, you with me. Kate will stay back for security. Dr. Peter Collins, their language specialist, had been working on the signal patterns. I think I'm starting to understand their communication method. It's very complex, but I might be able to manage basic conversation. Major Kate Sullivan checked her sidearm and nodded. I'll be ready if you need backup, but I hope we don't. The shuttle landed on what appeared to be an empty plain. Within minutes, a section of the ground opened up and several tall, thin figures emerged. They moved gracefully, almost floating across the surface toward the human shuttle. Morrison got his first good look at the aliens as they approached. They were taller than humans, with pale, almost transparent skin. Their faces had multiple eyes arranged in a pattern that seemed both beautiful and sad. When they moved, it was with a fluid grace that made them seem like they were underwater. The lead alien stopped several feet away and began making complex sounds. Peter listened carefully, then tried to respond in the same pattern. After several minutes of careful back and forth communication, Peter turned to Morrison. I think they want us to follow them. They seem afraid, not of us, but of something else. The aliens led them to an entrance hidden in the rocks. As they descended underground, Morrison was amazed by what he saw. The Zephyrians had built an entire city beneath the surface. It was beautiful, but it felt like a tomb. They were brought to a large chamber where an elderly Zephyrian waited. This one was clearly important, based on the way the others treated him. When he spoke, his voice was filled with an ancient sadness. Peter worked hard to translate the conversation. Slowly, piece by piece, the truth came out. He says his name is Vex Theta, Peter explained. He's what they call an elder counselor. He's been waiting for someone to come, someone who might be able to help. Morrison leaned forward. Help with what? The conversation continued, with Peter translating in fragments. He's talking about something called the Harvesters. They came to this sector 50 years ago. Not ships or armies, but something else. Something that attacks the mind. Elena was taking notes on everything. Ask him about the empty cities we found. Peter asked the question, then listened to the long, sad reply. He says the Harvesters don't destroy civilizations with weapons. They project something he calls the Great Sadness. It makes entire species lose the will to live. One by one, they just give up and die. Morrison felt his stomach drop. How many species? Hundreds, Peter translated. Maybe thousands. Across this entire region of space. The Zephyrians are among the last survivors, and they're only alive because they learned to shield their minds through meditation and by living underground. Lisa was scanning the chamber with her instruments. I'm detecting some kind of energy field around this place. It's artificial, like a barrier of some kind. Vex Theta noticed her scanner and spoke again. Peter translated. He says they built mental shields using their technology and their meditation practices. But the shields are failing. They estimate they have maybe 6 months before their remaining population succumbs to the despair. Kate's voice crackled through their communicators from the surface. Commander, I'm picking up some strange energy readings moving through the outer system. Whatever it is, it's big. Morrison felt a chill. Ask him about Earth, about humans. The conversation that followed was the most frightening yet. Peter's face grew pale as he translated. The Harvesters are methodical. They seek out the most helpful, most ambitious species first. They target civilizations that expand quickly, that reach for the stars, that refuse to accept limits. Peter paused, swallowing hard. He says humanity fits that pattern perfectly. Elena was working with her equipment to record everything. how do they know about us? The harvesters have been studying human expansion patterns, our colonies, our exploration ships, our radio signals. They know we exist, and they're coming for us. Vex Theta continued speaking, and Peter translated with growing urgency. He says the harvesters move slowly but steadily through space. They've been working their way toward human space for the past 20 years. Based on their pattern, they'll reach the Sol system in approximately 2 years. Marson stood up quickly. We need to get back to Earth. Command needs to know about this immediately. But Vex Theta wasn't finished. He spoke again, and this time his multiple eyes seemed to focus directly on Morrison. What's he saying? Morrison asked. Peter listened, then looked confused. He says there's something different about humans, something the other species didn't have. He wants to test something. Vex Theta approached Morrison and held out what looked like a small crystal device. When Morrison took it, the alien spoke again. He wants you to think about something that makes you happy. Peter translated. Something that gives you hope. Morrison wasn't sure what to expect, but he thought about Earth, about blue skies and green forests, about his daughter taking her first steps, about humanity reaching for the stars despite every obstacle. The crystal began to glow, brighter and brighter, until everyone in the chamber had to shield their eyes. Vex Theta stepped back, his multiple eyes wide with something that looked like amazement. He spoke rapidly to Peter. He says he's never seen anything like that. Peter translated, excitement creeping into his voice. The crystal is designed to measure hope and determination. Most species barely make it glow at all, especially when they know about the harvesters. What about humans? Morrison asked. Peter listened to the reply, then smiled for the first time since they'd landed. He says the crystal nearly overloaded. He's never seen a species with that level of stubborn hope. Vex Theta spoke again, and this time his voice carried something it hadn't before, a tiny spark of hope. He says maybe, just maybe, humans are different enough to make a difference. But first, you need to get back to your people and prepare them for what's coming. As they prepared to leave, Vex Theta gave them a data crystal containing everything the Zephyrians knew about the harvesters. It was a warning, but it was also something more. It was the first real hope this part of the galaxy had seen in 50 years. The shuttle lifted off from Zephy's Prime with the most important cargo the human race had ever carried. The knowledge that they were about to face an enemy that had never been defeated, and the first hint that maybe, just maybe, they had what it took to be the first species to fight back. The journey back to Earth felt like the longest trip of Morrison's life. Every day that passed was one day closer to the harvesters reaching human space. The crew of the Wanderer worked around the clock, analyzing the Zephyrian data and preparing their report. When they finally reached Earth orbit, Admiral Frank Mitchell was waiting for them. Within hours, Morrison found himself in the biggest meeting room at Colonial Defense Headquarters, surrounded by humanity's most important leaders. General Patricia Wells sat at the head of the table, her face serious as she reviewed the data. Next to her was Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief scientist for the Colonial Defense Council. Susan Perry, representing the civilian colonies, looked pale as she read through the translated surrender messages. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Admiral Mitchell said, his voice steady but tense. An unknown enemy has wiped out hundreds of civilizations across an entire sector of space, and they're heading toward Earth. Morrison nodded. That's correct, sir. But they don't wipe out civilizations in the traditional sense. They make them want to die. Dr. Webb leaned forward, his scientist curiosity overcoming his fear. This despair field the Zephyrians described. How does it work exactly? Elena Rodriguez, who had been studying the alien data for weeks, answered. According to their records, The harvesters project some kind of psychic energy that resonates with the brain patterns associated with hopelessness and despair. Most species have no natural defense against it. Most species, General Wells repeated. But the Zephyrian test suggested humans might be different. Lisa Campbell spoke up from her position at the table. The Hope crystal Morrison activated produced readings they'd never seen before. Somehow, human brain patterns seemed to resist the despair field. Dr. Webb's eyes lit up with scientific interest. We need to test this immediately. If humans really are naturally resistant, we need to understand why and how to enhance it. Within days, Earth's best scientists were working around the clock. Dr. Nicole Taylor, a quantum physicist, led a team studying the brainwave patterns of volunteers. Dr. Greg Martinez, who specialized in alien psychology, worked to understand exactly how the harvester influence functioned. The tests were conducted on Mars Colony, where John Parker and Dr. Helen Garcia had been studying the psychological profiles of successful colonists for years. They had noticed something interesting. The humans who did best in harsh, challenging environments shared certain mental characteristics. "Look at these patterns," Dr. Taylor said, pointing to brain scans displayed on the wall of the research lab. Humans who thrive under pressure show unusual activity in the areas of the brain associated with determination and hope. It's almost like we're wired to be stubborn. Dr. Martinez was comparing human brain patterns to those of other species they had encountered. Most intelligent life forms have evolved to recognize when a situation is hopeless and to conserve energy by giving up. It's actually a survival trait in most environments. But not for humans, Dr. Garcia observed. We seem to have evolved the opposite trait. We keep fighting even when logic says we should quit. Parker, who had spent years helping humans adapt to hostile environments, nodded in agreement. "I've seen colonists survive situations that should have killed them, simply because they refused to accept that they couldn't make it work. It drives other species crazy, but it keeps us alive." The breakthrough came when Dr. Carl Rogers, a specialist in brain enhancement technology, suggested a radical experiment. If human determination is our natural defense against the harvesters, what if we could amplify it? Morrison volunteered to be the first test subject. The procedure was risky and experimental, but the alternative was the potential extinction of humanity. The enhancement process took place in a specially shielded laboratory. Dr. Rogers used a combination of neural stimulation and psychological conditioning to strengthen the brain pathways associated with hope and determination. "How do you feel?" Dr. Taylor asked as Morrison came out of the procedure. Morrison paused, trying to find the right words. "Different. Like everything is more possible than it was before. Problems seem less like obstacles and more like puzzles to solve." They tested the enhancement by exposing Morrison to recorded samples of the harvester despair field that the Zephyrians had provided. Where the unenhanced humans felt crushing sadness and hopelessness, Morrison felt only a mild discomfort. "It's there," he reported. "I can feel the despair trying to get in, but it's like it can't find a way to stick. My mind just keeps bouncing back to thoughts about what we can do to fight it." Commander Ashley Stone and Captain Steve Johnson volunteered for the next round of enhancements. The results were even more encouraging. Not only could they resist the despair field, but when they worked together, they seemed to create a zone of clarity around themselves. "This is incredible," Dr. Martinez said, monitoring the brainwave readings. When the enhanced humans focus their determination together, they're actually generating a counter-frequency that disrupts the despair field. The implications were staggering. Humanity didn't just have a defense against the harvesters. They had a weapon. Admiral Mitchell called another emergency meeting. This time, the mood in the room was different. Instead of fear and desperation, There was a growing sense of purpose. "The enhancement process works," Dr. Webb reported. "We can create humans who are not only immune to the harvester influence, but can actually project a field that protects others." General Wells was already thinking strategically. How many people can we enhance? How long does the process take? Dr. Rogers consulted his notes. The procedure takes about 6 hours per person. We can set up multiple facilities and train more technicians, but we're still looking at months to enhance enough people to make a real difference. Morrison stood up. "We don't have months. The harvesters will be here in less than 2 years, and we need time to prepare and train." Susan Perry, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "There's something else to consider. If we can protect other species from the harvester influence, we might be able to save some of the civilizations that are still hiding." Alina nodded enthusiastically. "The Zephyrians are still alive, but barely. If we could get enhanced humans to them, we might be able to strengthen their defenses." Admiral Mitchell made the decision that would change everything. "We're going to do both. We'll enhance as many humans as possible and train them to use this ability. At the same time, we'll send enhanced teams to help any surviving civilizations we can find." Dr. Taylor was already working on the technical details. "We'll need to develop portable versions of the enhancement equipment, and we'll need to create devices that can amplify and focus the human counter-frequency." "Hope amplifiers," Morrison said, and somehow the name felt right. General Wells smiled grimly. "For the first time in 50 years, this part of the galaxy is going to see a species that doesn't run from the harvesters. We're going to run toward them." The meeting ended with humanity's leaders making plans that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. Instead of preparing to hide or flee from an unstoppable enemy, they were preparing to fight back in a way no other species had ever attempted. As the teams dispersed to begin their work, Morrison looked out the window at Earth's blue skies and thought about the empty cities they have found in the Andromeda sector. Those civilizations had surrendered because they couldn't imagine any other choice. Humans, it seemed, had trouble accepting that there was no other choice. And that stubborn refusal to give up might just be the key to saving the galaxy. 6 months after the first enhancement procedures, Admiral Mitchell stood in the command center watching the biggest fleet humanity had ever assembled prepare for launch. Operation Stormbreak was about to begin, and every person in the solar system knew that everything depended on what happened next. Captain Morrison, now commanding the flagship UHS Defiance, ran final checks with his enhanced crew. The ship had been completely rebuilt with Dr. Taylor's Hope amplifiers installed throughout the hull. When activated, these devices could boost the human counter frequency and project it across entire star systems. "All systems ready, Captain," reported Commander Kevin Hall from the weapons station. The Defiance didn't carry traditional weapons. Instead, it was armed with the most powerful Hope amplifiers ever built. Lieutenant Maria Santos checked the shield systems. "Defensive fields are online. The psychic barriers are holding steady." Captain Ben Clark opened communications with the rest of the fleet. "All ships report ready for departure. Enhanced crews are at full strength." Morrison looked around the bridge at his team. Every person there had volunteered for the enhancement procedure, knowing the risks. Dr. Robin Fisher, their medical officer, monitored everyone's brain patterns to make sure the enhancements were stable. "Remember," Morrison announced to the crew, "we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species the harvesters have silenced. Today, the galaxy gets its voice back." The first target was the Altair system, where long-range sensors had detected active harvester presence. Intelligence suggested they were in the process of consuming the last survivors of the Altarian civilization. As the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Altair, they got their first direct look at the enemy. The harvesters appeared as massive clouds of dark energy, beautiful and terrible as they drifted between the planets. They moved like living storms, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to draw hope out of anyone who looked at them. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Alex Turner from the pilot station. "They're huge." The harvesters seemed to notice the human ships immediately. The dark clouds began moving toward the fleet, and as they approached, every human on every ship felt the weight of absolute despair pressing against their minds. Morrison felt it too. The enhanced neural pathways in his brain detected the harvester, influence like a crushing weight trying to settle over his thoughts. For a moment, he understood why entire civilizations had simply given up. The despair wasn't just sadness. It was the complete absence of any reason to continue existing. "Activate hope amplifiers," Morrison ordered, fighting against the growing darkness in his mind. Dr. Fisher was watching the crew's vital signs on her monitors. "Captain, I'm seeing dangerous stress levels across the board. The despair field is stronger than anything we simulated." That was when the enhancement procedures proved their worth. As the hope amplifiers came online, Morrison felt his enhanced brain patterns spread through the ship's systems and into the minds of his crew. The crushing despair was still there, but now it felt manageable. "All hands, remember why we're here," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "Think about home. Think about the people we're protecting. Think about tomorrow." The effect was immediate and remarkable. As the crew focused on their hopes and determination, the ship's hope amplifiers began projecting a field of clarity that pushed back against the harvester influence. Lieutenant Turner was the first to notice the change. "Captain, look at the sensor readings from the planet below." On Altair Prime, something incredible was happening. The few surviving Altarians, who had been hiding in underground bunkers for months, were beginning to emerge. Protected by the human hope field, they were remembering what it felt like to want to live. But the harvesters weren't going to give up easily. The dark energy clouds moved closer to the human ships, intensifying their despair projection. Several smaller human vessels began to waver as their crews struggled against the overwhelming sadness. "U.S. Liberty is reporting crew failure," Captain Clark announced. "They're losing the will to maintain life support." Morrison made a decision that would become legend throughout the galaxy. "All ships, link your hope amplifiers to the Defiance. We're going to show these things what human determination really looks like." As the ships connected their systems, something unprecedented happened. The combined will of thousands of enhanced humans created a wave of pure determination that rolled across space like a tide. The harvesters, for the first time in their existence, encountered something they couldn't understand. Instead of despair and surrender, they were facing a species that seemed to grow more determined the harder things became. Commander Hall was monitoring the enemy response. "Captain, the harvester formations are breaking up. They single quotes retreating." On the surface of Altair Prime, the remaining population was emerging from their hiding places. Cities that had been dark for months were beginning to show lights again. The Altarians were broadcasting messages of gratitude and wonder. "This is Altair Command to Human Fleet," came a transmission in broken English. "We remember hope now. We remember why we built these cities. Thank you for giving us back our reasons to live." But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. Intelligence. Reports showed that the main harvester force was much larger and more powerful than what they had faced at Altair. Dr. Fisher approached Morrison as the fleet prepared to move to the next system. "Captain, the crew handled that better than our best projections. The enhancement process seems to get stronger when humans work together." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "When the hope amplifiers were linked, each person's determination seemed to boost everyone else's. It's like human stubbornness is contagious in the best possible way. Over the next several weeks, the human fleet moved from system to system, liberating survivors and pushing back harvester forces. Each victory made them stronger and more confident. Word began to spread through the galaxy that something impossible was happening. Species that had been hiding for decades began to emerge from their shelters. The Zephyrians sent messages of amazement and gratitude. Even races that had never met humans before began to reach out, asking for help. Captain Clark was coordinating communications with dozens of alien species. "Captain, we're getting requests for assistance from all over this sector. Everyone wants to know how we're doing this." Morrison smiled as he watched another dead system come back to life on the main screen. "Tell them it's simple. We're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to give up." The liberation of each system taught the humans more about their enemy. The harvesters weren't just destroyers. They were trapped in their own despair. They had been projecting hopelessness for so long that they had forgotten any other way to exist. As the human fleet grew stronger and more confident, they began to realize that their mission wasn't just about defeating the harvesters. It was about healing them. But first, they had to reach the source of the harvester power. Long-range scans had detected a massive structure at the galactic core, something the aliens called the Despair Nexus. If humanity was going to save the galaxy, they would have to face the harvesters where they were strongest. The final battle was coming, and for the first time in 50 years, an entire sector of space was looking up at the stars with hope instead of fear. The journey to the galactic core took 3 months, and with each passing day, the human fleet grew larger. Ships from dozens of liberated species joined the formation, their crews protected by human hope fields. What had started as a single human fleet had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a united armada of hope. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the massive structure ahead of them grow larger on the screen. The Despair Nexus was unlike anything they had encountered. It looked like a twisted version of a space station, built from dark crystal that seemed to absorb light itself. Energy tendrils stretched out from it like the arms of some cosmic octopus, reaching toward distant star systems. "How big is that thing?" asked Lieutenant Turner, his voice filled with awe. Dr. Taylor checked her readings. "It's the size of a small moon. The energy it's putting out is incredible. This is the source of the despair field that's been affecting the entire galaxy." Commander Hall was monitoring the defensive systems. "Captain, we're detecting thousands of harvester entities around the Nexus. This is their main stronghold." As the fleet approached, the despair field grew stronger than anything they had experienced before. Even with their enhancements and hope amplifiers, the human crews began to struggle. Several ships reported crew members collapsing under the weight of absolute hopelessness. Dr. Fisher was watching the medical readings with growing concern. "Captain, the despair field here is off the charts. We're losing people to complete psychological breakdown." Morrison felt it too. The enhanced pathways in his brain were fighting a constant battle against despair so pure and concentrated that it felt like drowning in darkness. But he had learned something important during the past months of fighting. Human determination wasn't just about refusing to give up. It was about finding reasons to keep going. "All ships, link your hope amplifiers to maximum power," Morrison ordered. "And I want everyone to remember something. We're not here because we have to be. We're here because we choose to be." He opened communications to the entire fleet, human and alien ships alike. "Every person listening to this chose to come here today. Every one of us could have stayed home, could have hidden, could have given up, but we didn't. We're here because we believe in tomorrow." The effect was immediate and powerful. As thousands of enhanced humans focused their determination together, the combined hope field pushed back against the Nexus. For the first time in eons, the despair Nexus flickered. But the harvesters weren't giving up without a fight. The ancient entities that surrounded the Nexus began moving toward the fleet, and as they approached, the despair became so intense that reality itself seemed to bend under its weight. Dr. Martinez, who had been studying harvester psychology, made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, I'm reading the energy patterns from the Nexus. These aren't just weapons or tools. The harvesters are trapped inside their own creation." Morrison looked at the data Martinez was showing him. "What do you mean trapped?" "The Nexus feeds on despair, but it also creates it. The harvesters built this thing to project hopelessness across the galaxy, but over time, it turned them into beings of pure despair. They can't escape it any more than their victims could." Elena Rodriguez, who had joined the mission as an expert on alien cultures, understood immediately. They're not evil, they're suffering. They've been trapped in their own despair for so long that they've forgotten anything else exists. The revelation changed Morrison's entire approach to the battle. "All ships, hold your fire. We're not here to destroy the harvesters. We're here to free them." Working with Engineer Parker and Dr. Garcia, the fleet began reconfiguring their hope amplifiers. Instead of using them as weapons to push back the despair field, they turned them into something completely different. A galaxy-wide broadcast of human determination and hope. The plan was audacious beyond belief. They were going to project every positive human emotion they could think of directly into the despair nexus itself. "Remember everything good about being alive," Morrison announced to the fleet. "Remember children laughing. Remember the smell of rain on Earth. Remember the first time you saw the stars and decided you wanted to touch them." As the Hope broadcast began, something unprecedented happened. The harvesters stopped attacking. For the first time in centuries, they felt something other than despair. The ancient entities began to remember what they had been before the Nexus consumed them. Commander Stone, piloting one of the lead ships, volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. "I'm taking a small team directly into the Nexus. If we can reach the core and plant a hope amplifier there, we might be able to break the cycle permanently." Morrison, Rodriguez, and Stone flew directly into the heart of the despair nexus. Inside, they found something heartbreaking: the preserved remains of the civilization that had built it. They had been so afraid of their own despair that they had tried to contain it, only to become prisoners of their own creation. At the center of the nexus, Stone placed the most powerful hope amplifier ever built. As it activated, it began broadcasting human determination, human stubbornness, and human refusal to accept defeat directly into the source of galactic despair. The effect spread outward like ripples in a pond. The dark crystal of the nexus began to change, its light-absorbing surface becoming transparent and bright. The harvesters themselves began to transform, their forms of dark energy slowly brightening, as they remembered what hope felt like. Across the galaxy, abandoned worlds received power for the first time in 50 years. Hidden civilizations emerged from their shelters, blinking in sunlight they thought they would never see again. Species that had been extinct in all but body began to remember why life was worth living. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was permanent. The Galactic Hope Network, as it came to be called, maintained a constant broadcast of determination, an optimism that would prevent the despair from ever taking hold again. Months later, Morrison stood in the rebuilt capital of Zephyrs Prime, watching human children and young Zephyrians play together in gardens that had been dark for half a century. The harvesters, now calling themselves the Illuminated, worked alongside other species to repair the damage they had caused. Vex Theta, the elderly Zephyrian who had first warned humanity about the threat, approached Morrison with something the captain had never seen before: a smile. "Your species has given us something we thought was lost forever," the alien said through a translator that Dr. Collins had helped design. You have given us back our future." Morrison looked up at the stars, where ships from 100 different species were working together to explore new worlds and build new civilizations. The galaxy was no longer silent. It was filled with the sound of hope. "We didn't give you anything," Morrison replied. "We just reminded you that tomorrow is always worth fighting for." As he watched the alien children learn to laugh again, Morrison thought about the empty cities they had found so long ago. Those civilizations had surrendered because they couldn't imagine any other choice. Humans, it turned out, had never learned how to surrender properly. And that stubborn refusal to give up had not only saved humanity, but had given the entire galaxy back its voice. The stars were no longer silent. They were singing,